Slavery is bad. I think we can all agree on that. Having slaves and buying slaves is not a good thing. The most recent episode of Mushoku Tensei Season 2 had a very peculiar sequence where the main character, Rudeus Greyret, goes on a casual date with his childhood friend to take a stroll down to the slave market. And this is something that I'm sure reactionaries are going to look at from a very shallow perspective. They're going to lump Mushoku Tensei in with all of the other garbage isekai that have slaves, and they're going to continue writing off a story that they were never going to experience in the first place. But I want to talk more about the role that this aspect has in the story, and why even from a narrative and thematic perspective, it's still rubbing even people who like this series the wrong way. It's pretty obvious that Mushoku Tensei's world is based on a mix of high and low fantasy. This is a fantastical world with tons of different races and magic abilities and powers. Everything you want in a classic fantasy story is here, but there's also an angle to the world that is rooted in a much more grounded medieval setting, and because of that medieval setting, it makes perfect sense for this to be a world that has slaves. You could even argue that this is in favor of the world building itself, and I would even agree with that. We had multiple points in Season 1 where the concept of slaves existing in this world informed storylines and informed characters in a way that was interesting. It's with all of that being said that I want to talk about what I think is actually bothering people right now. I think most viewers understand why slavery would exist in this kind of world. It's more about the story's weird and kind of clashing, kind of off-putting approach to the way that it portrays that slavery in relation to the characters. As far as I can recall, we've really only had a few notable encounters with slavery in the Mushoku Tensei series so far. We had it in Season 1 when Rudeus was staying with Philip and Saros and found out that the beast maids there were pretty much confirmed to be kidnapped slaves. We had it later in Season 1 when Rudeus and the party rescued a bunch of aforementioned kidnapped beast villagers about to be sold as slaves. And now we have it in this episode where Rudeus, Zanoba, and Sylphie are going out to buy a slave to help Zanoba make figurines. I bring up every instance that is used in this series so far because I think it's important to understand the expectations that are raised about this over the course of the story. Rudeus is a good guy. Rudeus has ethics. Rudeus has morals. I don't think he's a selfless champion of justice, but I do think when push comes to shove, he's somebody that does the right thing whenever he can, and that's what makes him likable. In Season 1, Rudeus gets caught up in a bunch of thugs kidnapping and murdering beast villagers, and he puts his life on the line to stop that from happening. I can't tell you what Rudeus's specific thoughts are about slavery, but I can tell you what the story is conveying in this moment and in this plotline. Slavery is bad. Bad guys operate in slavery. Being kidnapped from your home and sold off to who knows where, that sucks. That is horrible. Being sold off to pay debts and ending up locked in some basement, that sucks. That's horrible. These are bad things. The story wants you to know that these are bad things. So when you have an episode like this where Rudeus, somebody of sound mind and good ethics, somebody who comes from a world that this is reprehensible in, somebody who literally participated in the liberation of villagers that were going to become slaves, seeing somebody like that just agree to go to a slave market and agree to buy a slave for something as trivial as Zanoba needing to make figurines, without even a second of hesitation, no inner thoughts or conversation, not even the slightest acknowledgement that this kind of sucks, that would definitely rub some people the wrong way. I mean, this man is literally making jokes to Sylphie about naked, chained up slaves that are right in front of him. Now, I already know a lot of the counterpoints that somebody might bring up here, and I'm not really interested in combating every single one, but I will say one that I myself have thought of in contrast to everything that I've said so far, something that I actually already mentioned earlier in this video. We don't really know what Rudius's thoughts are specifically on slavery in this world. There's never really been a point in any of these situations encountering them where he's commented on it one way or another. Yeah, he saved a bunch of villagers that were being kidnapped, but that was also just an emergency situation that he got caught up in, and also was a bit bigger in scope than just these guys will become slaves. That was a big ordeal that involved the life and death of an entire village. This is definitely something that I naturally think is fleshed out more in the novels. Rudius may actually have specific thoughts or acknowledgement towards slaves in this world that we just never hear in the anime. That is a total possibility. Phenom from the future here, this was actually such a hot topic for discussion that Refugin himself came out to explain Rudius's thoughts on slavery while I was making this video. Essentially, Rudius takes a moral neutrality on slavery, and he justifies that thinking by saying that slavery isn't even necessarily worse than where they might have been before. Yeah, I don't know if that necessarily justifies taking a neutral perspective on slavery, even if it wasn't worse than where they were before. It's hard to really call that a satisfying response for his character, but there you go. Refugin also clarifies that he in fact does not condone slavery, thank Christ. Something that I'm sure didn't need clarification for anybody rational, but that's Twitter for you. None of this really changes my thoughts in the rest of this video though, so back to your regularly scheduled broadcasting. But because we don't hear any of his thoughts on these things, you kind of just have to imply his thoughts based on the kind of character that he is and what the story itself is telling you through these events that are happening. I don't know about you guys, but an entire arc revolving around Rudius saving beast villagers who are about to be sold into slavery definitely tells me that 1, Rudius is a good guy who doesn't want that to happen, and 2, the story is saying that this is a bad thing. So when you go from a storyline like that to a storyline like this, where all of the good characters that you thought you knew, like Rudius or Sylphie, are not mentioning how buying a slave is at best distasteful and at worst repulsive, it just definitely comes across like an inconsistency in the morals and ethics of the story itself. Now, I want to make it clear that I'm not somebody who usually gets offended by stories. It's fiction, it's pretend, it's made up. It takes some truly extreme stuff to get under my skin in a way where I would say it offends me, and this is definitely not that. But what I can say is that this part of the story definitely made me like Rudius less than I did before. It kind of made me like Sylphie less than I did before. I don't need these characters to suddenly turn into heroes of justice who rescue all the slaves. I don't need the story to turn into a fairy tale where these crimes are being abolished and it becomes a perfect world. I don't think Mushoku Tensei is concerned with being this kind of idealistic and optimistic setting, and I think that's okay. I think that suits this story and this world well. But if you are going to have an element like this in the story, you walk a dangerous line based on how your characters interact and operate with it. I think season 1 did this well, but I don't think I would say this episode did it well. Is Mushoku Tensei ruined because of this plot point? Yeah, it is. I don't think I can watch this series anymore. Sorry, that was a joke. No, I don't really care about this in the grand scheme of things, but it does strike me as kind of a weird thing to bring into the story in the first place for such a trivial plot point as Zanoba needing to make figurines. I'm sure there were plenty of other opportunities to bring a character like Julie into the story. But that's not even the main problem here. I am perfectly willing to go with the flow and accept that for whatever reason, they needed to buy a slave. I mean, I've talked in numerous other videos about how this story is able to humanize people who do bad things, and I certainly think that in the context of this episode, this could be another example. The real issue is just that it's not treated that way. There is a distinct lack of self-awareness from both Rudius and the story itself, and it's kind of a baffling place in the story to lose that. Maybe there's more detail in the novels, maybe some of you think that what the anime had was already enough, but that is where I currently stand. Let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments below, and join the Discord server where we already have had many beefy, lengthy discussions about this very topic, which kind of inspired this video in the first place. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.